Let's fill out a 2024 presidential map based on the average margin across all 50 states' non-presidential major statewide elections since 2016. Here on this sheet, I've compiled the results of all U.S. Senate and governor races, as well as the statewide popular vote for U.S. House in each state, dating all the way back to 2016. And by U.S. House popular vote, I mean the difference between the combined votes for Democrats and Republicans across all of the congressional districts in the states. I think this will be an interesting exercise shedding light on the partisan lean of each state down the ballot from the presidential contest between Trump and Biden, and I'm sure that some of these outputs will surprise you. Let's go in order of poll closing time here. Starting at 7 o'clock on the East Coast, polls will close in most counties except for those in the Central Time Zone in the Panhandle in Florida, statewide in Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, Vermont, and Virginia. Now for the rating classifications in these videos, we are going to mark states with average margins below 3% as tilt, between 3 to 7% as lean, and then from 7 to 12% as likely. Any margin above 12% is solid or safe. So on that note, we're going to be marking Indiana, Kentucky, and South Carolina as solid Republican for Trump. Florida will go likely Republican, and Georgia will lean towards Republicans. Then, for Joe Biden, we're placing Virginia down as likely Democrat, and then Vermont as safe blue. Going back over to the sheet, you see the average margins in Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, and Vermont are all above 12%. Florida is R plus 8.9, which is a substantial margin driven primarily by the most recent midterm cycle in 2022, where Republican incumbents Senator Marco Rubio and Governor Ron DeSantis both won re-election by landslide margins, at least by Florida standards, 16.4% and 19.4% respectively. And Republicans also dominated the U.S. House contests here as well, receiving a higher share by 18.6% of the vote than Democrats across the states. These margins are significantly higher than we had previously seen here. In fact, all other 6 data points are in single digits here since 2016. Notably, in 2018, Republican then-Governor Rick Scott, who's on the ballot again this November, only won his first election to the Senate by 0.12%, while DeSantis was first elected to the governor's office, defeating Andrew Gillum by 0.4% in the concurrent governor race. Now, on the other hand, we see an opposite kind of trend in Georgia, where each of the last 7 statewide races were decided by single digits, after the state had previously leaned much more strongly Republican. Democrats have now won the last 3 U.S. Senate races, 2 in 2020, in the high-profile regular and special election runoffs that were actually held in January of 2021, and then most recently in 2022, Raphael Warnock again won in a runoff against Republican Herschel Walker. Yet in terms of the governor races, Brian Kemp has won the last 2 races for governor, and the U.S. House popular vote has still leaned Republican as well, contributing to this overall R plus 3.5 average margin. Finally, Virginia has also seen a strong leftward trend over the last 2 or so decades, as the D.C. suburbs in Northern Virginia have grown and diversified. No Republican has won a federal statewide election here, that being president or U.S. Senate, since 2004, though Republicans have won 2 of the last 4 governor races held in off-year cycles. But even if we were to include Virginia's off-year governor race in 2021, which was R plus 2, favoring Glenn Youngkin, the average margin would still be D plus 9.7. Now let's head to our next poll closing now. It's 7:30 p.m. on the East Coast. Polls will close in North Carolina, Ohio, and West Virginia. All 3 are states that Trump is expected to win this November. And here on this map, we're going to place West Virginia down as safe Republican, Ohio as likely Republican, and then North Carolina as tilt Republican. The average margins here range from R plus 1.9 in North Carolina to R plus 9.4 in Ohio, and then R plus 20.8 in West Virginia. That West Virginia number is a lot lower than Trump's 39-point win in 2020, as in 2018, the Democratic Senator Joe Manchin prevailed by 3 points. And in 2016, then Democrat Jim Justice won the race for governor by almost 7 points. Now, Justice has since switched party affiliation to Republican and is now running for Senate to replace Manchin. A weird timeline of events there. North Carolina is interesting because it has been a perennially competitive state for quite some time now. The last 4 presidential races were each decided by less than 4 points, and all 9 of our data points here have a margin of less than 7 points. Republicans have won the last 5 U.S. Senate races, while Democrats have won 2 straight governor races, and the U.S. House popular votes has split 2 and 2 over the last 4 cycles since 2016. Let's go to 8 p.m. now, the largest poll closing on election night in terms of the sheer volume of states. Not a lot of battlegrounds here, though, apart from Pennsylvania, and then the fringely competitive states of New Hampshire and Texas. Over on the map, we're going to place a bunch of states in the Northeast down as safe for Joe Biden. Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, D.C., Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and then Illinois as well. The average margins here all exceed 12 points. Then for Trump, we can go ahead and place North and South Dakota as safe Republican, and in the South, we have Oklahoma, Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. Meanwhile, both Missouri and Texas will go down as likely Republican. Then back over to Biden, we're going to place Maine's statewide contest as likely Democrat, its first district as safe Democrat, and then the second district actually as tilting towards Trump. He did win it by 10 points in 2016 and 7 in 2020, but it has been represented by a Democrat in the House since 2018. Filling out New England, we also have New Hampshire leaning Democrat, and then the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, is also leaning Democrat. As you take a look back over at the sheet here, the margin in Pennsylvania is D plus 5.4, so it's actually more Democratic leaning than New Hampshire. As well, Pennsylvania is a notoriously competitive state at the presidential level between Republicans and Democrats. Democrats have pretty much exclusively dominated statewide races here over the last couple decades below the presidential ballot. In fact, they've won 16 of 20 races for president, senate, and governor since the start of the 21st century. Most recently in 2022, John Fetterman won the U.S. Senate race over Dr. Oz by almost 5 points, while Josh Shapiro won the open governor contest in a landslide over Doug Mastriano by almost 15 points. As for the Granite States, New Hampshire, this is an interesting case here, as statewide races have traditionally been more Republican-friendly than the presidential race. As well, New Hampshire is a relatively reliably liberal state for federal office. Its residents do have an inclination to elect governors that won't raise taxes, much like in neighboring Vermont and Massachusetts, 2 of the bluest states in the entire country, that have shown a willingness to elect socially liberal, fiscally conservative Republican governors in elections over the last few cycles. Yet still, as you see here over in New Hampshire, the average margin does lean pretty decisively to the left, as Democrats have won the last 4 U.S. Senate races and a strong majority in the U.S. House popular votes over the last few cycles as well. Now, Texas is the only other state here with a single-digit average margin, as well Republicans have held a lead in each of these data points dating back to 2016. The 2018 cycle did mark a significant shift towards a more competitive down-ballot environment here, as remember that Ted Cruz, the incumbent Republican senator, just barely held on against popular Democrat, then newcomer Beto O'Rourke by 2.6%. While the U.S. House popular vote was also extremely narrow, the narrowest in decades, in fact, at 3.4%. The next poll closing time is 8:30 p.m., with Arkansas as the only state here, which we'll place in the safe Republican column on our map and move right along to 9 p.m. This is personally my favorite poll closing of the night. We have Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin all seeing their polls close here. It's battleground central here as we go over to the map. We can place Wyoming as a safe Republican state, as well as Nebraska's statewide contest and the 1st and 3rd districts, while the 2nd district only leans towards Trump. Biden did carry this Omaha-based 2nd district by almost 7 points in 2020, but it did go to Trump by a couple of points in 2016 and has not voted Democrat for governor, Senate, or House since well before 2016 either. Then we're also going to place Kansas and Louisiana as safe for Trump with margins exceeding 12 points. For Biden, on the other hand, we'll go ahead and place New York, the Empire State, as safe Democrat, and then New Mexico as well. Colorado goes in the likely blue category, where it is joined by Minnesota. While over in Michigan, we're going to place it in the lean Democrat column here. And then for Trump, Wisconsin is actually tilting towards Trump, Iowa, likely, and then Arizona is also tilt Republican. Now that pushes Trump in the Republican Party up to 256 electoral votes now. He's only 14 shy of 270, with plenty of electoral votes still on the board, not yet rated. Let's go back over to the sheet again here and go through each of the battlegrounds, starting in Arizona, where Democrats have now won the last 3 Senate races, the last governor election, and of course the last presidential race as well. Still, the overall average is R plus 2.8, as the U.S. House popular vote has leaned strongly to the right, and the 2018 governor and 2016 Senate races were also strong R. Down in Michigan, similar to its Rust Belt counterpart, Pennsylvania, it's a key presidential battleground where Democrats have performed exceedingly well down ballot over the years. In 2022, incumbent Governor Gretchen Whitmer was reelected by 10.5 points after she was first elected in 2018 by 9.5 points. Republicans have also failed to win a U.S. Senate race here in Michigan since 1994, and the U.S. House popular vote has consistently tilted towards Democrats as well. Finally, let's look at Wisconsin, which deviates from its peers in Michigan and Pennsylvania here, as the average margin is R plus 0.6. Now, this core Rust Belt trio here on the map has voted for the same presidential candidate in every cycle since 1988. They've gone blue every time, except in 2016 when Trump carried all 3 in a surprise sweep. Wisconsin has generally been the most Republican-leaning of the 3 states, both in terms of presidential margins, but especially here in down-ballot races, where the U.S. House popular vote has favored the GOP in 3 of the last 4 cycles, as well as 2 of the last 3 U.S. Senate races. Alrighty, let's go to 10 p.m. now, which is when the action does start to wind down, with polls closing in Idaho, Montana, Nevada, Oregon, and Utah. The only state really worth watching here is Nevada. Is going over to the map, both Idaho and Utah are safe Republican. Montana is only lean GOP, more on that shortly. While for Joe Biden, Oregon is safe Democrat, and Nevada tilt Democrat. Notably, with these victories in Utah, Idaho, and Montana, we see Trump and Republicans have reached exactly 270 electoral votes, enough to win the presidency. Biden trails behind with 195, though the electoral behemoth California is still outstanding, and Washington's 12 electoral votes in the Pacific Northwest as well. Going back to the sheet, we see that Montana's average margin is only R plus 6.6, which is much narrower than Trump's 16-point margin in 2020, primarily driven by the more competitive recent U.S. Senate races. In 2020, incumbent Republican Senator Steve Daines defeated sitting Democratic Governor Steve Bullock by an exact 10-point margin, while in 2018, Democratic Senator Jon Tester was reelected to a third term by 3.5%. And then back in 2016's governor election, Democratic incumbent Steve Bullock won a second term by almost 4 points. Now, this kind of ticket splitting is becoming rarer and rarer, though. As we already saw in 2020, both the Senate and governor races were thought to be competitive, but with Trump headlining the top of the ticket in the presidential cycle, the GOP candidates were pulled over the finish line with ease. There will be another test of this November, as Jon Tester is seeking a 4th term in the Senate, in a state that Trump is likely to win by around 15 to 20 points. We'll see what happens. I personally think the presidential cycle effect will take Tester down, but again, we'll see. He is a uniquely popular candidate. Finally, in Nevada, the average margin is effectively D plus 2, Biden and Hillary Clinton both won Nevada by 2.4 points in the last two presidential cycles, despite Biden winning the national popular vote by a wider margin, as Nevada has seemingly been trending slowly to the right over the last decade or so. The 2022 midterms exemplified this trend more so than any other state, as the GOP flipped the governor's office by 1.5% and came within 8 points of unseating a reasonably well-liked Democratic incumbent, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, as well. Perhaps most notably, though, Republicans won more U.S. House votes than Democrats for the first time in more than 25 years. Yet as you can see here, every other data point prior to 2022 favored Democrats, albeit by narrow margins. The 2018 Senate and governor races were D+5 and D+4, respectively, while 2016 Senate race was D+2.4. Alrighty, let's head over to our penultimate poll closing time at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. local in California and Washington. Two Democratic strongholds here with average margins of D+32 and D+18. They're both obviously going to be in Biden's corner as safe Democrat states here on our map, without that much to talk about. Almost every single data point here exceeds 12 points, apart from the 2016 cycle in Washington, when governor and U.S. House results were still likely D margins. No Republican candidate has won a major statewide office in either of these states, California or Washington, since Arnold Schwarzenegger was elected governor in California in 2006. Alrighty, that brings us to our final poll closing time at midnight Eastern, as polls will close in the two non-contiguous outer 48 states of Alaska and Hawaii, which were both admitted to the Union in 1959, yet have had completely opposite political or electoral trajectories. Alaska, at R plus 8.7, has been one of the most reliable Republican states in the nation, while Hawaii, at D plus 44.3, is the complete opposite. Both states first participated in the 1960 presidential election, and in the 16 cycles since, Alaska has voted Republican all but once, while Hawaii has voted blue all but twice. Over on our map, we're going to place down as safe Democrat Hawaii, and then for Trump, we're going to place Alaska as likely Republican. Trump's 2020 margin in Alaska was only 10 points, the lowest since 1992, and Biden's 42.7% vote share was the highest for a Democrat since LBJ won Alaska in 1964. But the reason that this margin here on the sheet is only R plus 8.7 is because Democrats did win the most recent U.S. House race in 2022 by 10 points. Mary Peltola defeated Sarah Palin in the final ranked choice results, 55% to 45%. But even beyond that, the last two U.S. House races and the governor race in 2018 were also decided by less than 10 points in favor of Republicans. Alrighty, going back over to the completed electoral map now, Trump and Republicans have won 273 electoral votes to Biden and the Democrats 265. Again, this map is based on the average margin of Senate, governor, and House races across every state since the 2016 election cycle. My prediction is that in 5 to 10 years or so, we're going to start to see fewer and fewer lean states, similar to the current presidential electoral college map, as everything becomes more correlated and there's less deviation than ever between the presidential and down-ballot contests. That does it though for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this visualization of data. Feel free to let me know your thoughts and reactions in the comments below, and let me know what other data you would like to see turned into a map in videos in the future. Shout out to my channel members on screen here. Thank you so much for your support. If you would like to become a member, go ahead and click the join button below this video to receive exclusive perks. Make sure to subscribe to my channel down below, and please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. You can check out more content from my channel here, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. EP out.